Hello, everyone, and God bless. My name is Zachary Strong, and I am a biblical scholar as well as a Noahide, which means I'm a non Jew who follows the parts of the law of Moses that apply to me, and specifically the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, the seven laws of the children of Noah. So, religiously, I fall under Orthodox Judaism. Okay, I'm not a Jew, but that's the religious thing that would apply to me is Orthodox Judaism. And although a lot of people look at Orthodox Judaism as a religion, it's actually a number of things. Okay, so Orthodox Jews are an indigenous group. They, are also a religion, and it's also a legal system. Okay, and not only a legal system, it's also an academic field. Okay, Jewish law is like an academic field. And so, in the spirit of, investigating and interrogating the laws that exist, I'm going to be raising what I think is one of the most important halakhic questions that any non Jew, any Noahide could ask. And that is, do non Noahides have a share in the world to come? Do non Noahides essentially get to heaven? Okay? Now, based on what I've seen online in Noahide discourse, I think most people would say no. Okay, if you don't accept the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, the seven laws of the children of Noah, if you don't accept those and so on, you don't go to Olam Haba. And people would point me to the Mishnah Torah, specifically Laws of Kings and Wars, chapter 8. Anyone who accepts upon himself the fulfillment of these seven mitzvot and is precise in their observance is considered one of the pious among the nations and will merit a share in the world to come. This applies only when they accept them and fulfill them, because the Holy One, blessed be He, commanded them in the Torah and informed us through Moses, our teacher, that Noah's descendants had been commanded to fulfill them previously. However, if he fulfills them out of intellectual conviction, he is not a resident alien, nor of the pious among the nations, nor of their wise men. So, a reading of this would indicate that no, non-Noahides have no share in the world to come. And that seems to be the prevailing opinion that I've seen even among rabbis. However, I'm here to raise some questions. Okay, I have some questions about this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into the Talmud a little bit and investigate a concept within Jewish law known as Tinok Shanishba, or captive children. Okay, and this is a section of halakha that deals specifically with Jews. However, I'm then going to go back to the Mishnah Torah and see if this also applies to non-Jews. For the record, I'm going to be sending this video to a couple of rabbis I know to get their opinion on it. And if you're a Noahide and you have questions after watching this video, get this to your closest rabbi, and we'll get their opinions on it. Because I think this is an important halakhic question, and I think it would help if we had this question answered. It would help for a number of reasons, which I'll get into at the end of the video, but having answers to this I think would help. So anyway, off to the Talmud we go. So, Tractate Shavuot 5a. From where is it derived that one is liable to bring a sliding scale offering only for cases in which he had awareness at the beginning and awareness at the end, but had a lapse of awareness in between when he actually transgressed? The verse states with regards to a person awareness of the fact that he was impure, and it was concealed, mentioning it twice in Leviticus chapter 5. The first mention teaches that one is liable only if during the transgression he was unaware of his status, and the second mention teaches that one is liable only if he had awareness of his status before the transgression. This is the statement of Rabbi Akiva. In Tractate Shabbat 68b, with regard to a child who was taken captive among the Gentiles and a convert who converted among the Gentiles and does not know the essence of Shabbat, and if he performed many prohibited labors on multiple Shabbatot, he is only liable to bring one sin offering for all his unwitting transgressions. and he is liable to bring one sin offering for all the blood he unwittingly ate before he learned of the prohibition, and one sin offering for all the forbidden fat that he ate, and one for all the idolatry that he worshipped. And Munbaz, one of the sages, deems him exempt from bringing any sacrifice. So from this, we find that there is a tremendous amount of leniency granted to non-Jews who were raised among the nations. They don't know the commandments. They don't know the Torah. They don't know the prohibitions, the statutes, and the ordinances. They don't know. Okay, and then once they're brought back into the nation of Israel, and they learn about the prohibitions, the statutes, and the ordinances, and the commandments, once they learn about it, then they're more liable. Okay, but up until that point, the sages basically say that there's a tremendous amount of leniency. Okay? Now, this halakha is specifically for Jews. This halakha is specifically for Jews. However, if we jump back to the Mishnah Torah, Laws of Kings and Wars, chapter 10, we find the following. A Noahide who inadvertently violates one of his commandments is exempt from all punishment with the exception of a person who kills inadvertently. When does the above apply? When he inadvertently violates a commandment without sinful intention. For example, a person who engages in relations with his colleague's wife under the impression that she is his own wife or unmarried. If, however, one knew that she was his colleague's wife but did not know that she was forbidden to him, or it occurred to him that this act was permitted, or one killed without knowing that it is forbidden to kill, he is considered close to having sinned intentionally and is executed. This is not considered as an inadvertent violation, for he should have learned the obligations incumbent upon him, and he did not. Okay? So this is very, very interesting. I think this is one of the most interesting aspects of Noahide law, to be honest. Like, a lot of Noahides online are concerned with the definitions of ger toshav and other things. Like, I don't think that's as relevant as this. Okay? Because from the Laws of Kings and Wars, it says, a non-Jew who inadvertently violates one of his commandments is exempt from all punishment. Okay? The only liability seems to be that they should have learned the obligations and did not. Okay, so let's think about this. Okay? Let's say you're an atheist who's born into a non-Jewish atheist family. You were raised from birth and taught science is the only source of truth. You were taught that religion is barbaric, backwards, and primarily about control. Or let's say you're a non-Jew born into a Christian family. You were raised from birth to believe Christian interpretations of Tanakh. You were threatened with eternal damnation if you don't believe hard enough. You were systematically discouraged from exploring Judaism. Or let's say you're a non-Jew born in India. You were raised from birth to believe Buddhism, Hinduism, or Islam. You are subject to extreme cultural pressure to conform and believe, and you were never exposed to Torah. Okay? It seems to me that in these cases, it's similar to the issue of Tinok Shenishba. Any transgressions, not any transgressions, but many transgressions would be considered inadvertent. Okay? And therefore, not subject to punishment. Okay? So, people in the Noahide community, and even some rabbis, like Rabbi Yosef Mizrahi, will say that non-Jews are being punished for worshiping JC. But it seems like that is inadvertent, at least in many cases. Okay, like, for example, I was walking down the street a few months ago, and a woman was sitting on a bench and she called me over. Okay? And she started talking to me about the Bible. Specifically, when Eliezer was going to Lavan's house to find a wife, right? So she was telling me about that story and so on, and she mentioned she was a Christian. She was surprised I knew stuff about the Bible, and I said, oh yeah, I'm a Noahide, like I follow the law of Moses, and she had never heard of it before. Okay? And then she shared with me like a really brilliant, just general teaching about bitachon and emunah. And then I went on my way. Okay, so from our current mainstream understanding, she's liable for idol worship and blah, blah, blah. Okay, but that doesn't seem to be the case to me based on the 10th chapter of Laws of Kings and Wars. It would seem that in some ways she is also like kind of a Tinok Shanishba. She was probably raised in a Christian family, goes to church. She's just, a good old regular Christian woman. Okay? Doesn't seem to me that she's facing a tremendous amount of liability. Now, even more shockingly, millennials and Gen Z, specifically millennials and Gen Z, who are LGBT, they were raised from birth to believe certain things about human nature and certain things about the science of human nature. I might make a video on this specifically, but when you look at the last 60 years of psychological science and the history of that science and how it was developed, you see that there's a giant psyop. It's a giant psyop. Everything related to LGBT science is a giant psyop. And millennials like myself and Gen Zs were raised from birth to believe wholeheartedly in science and so on, and by extension this psyop. Okay, those any transgressions that are committed are inadvertent and therefore exempt from all punishment. And this is quite shocking. This is quite shocking, I think, to a lot of people. Just the idea that inadvertent transgressions, like idolatry for Christians or forbidden relations for millennials and Gen Z, the idea that these would be inadvertent and therefore exempt from punishment under what's written in the Mishnah Torah, I think a lot of people might be surprised by that. And then it further raises the question, which I brought at the beginning of this video, which is, are non-Noahides eligible for a share in Olam Haba? Okay? Not necessarily for the commandments that they aren't observing, but more so for the midot that they developed. Okay? Because a lot of non-Noahides have worked a lot on themselves in terms of discipline. They've worked a lot on themselves in terms of loving kindness. They've worked on themselves in terms of courage. Okay? Bonding. And so on. And to some extent, wisdom. All of which are emotional midot. So it's like, do they gain a share in Olam Haba for the rectification of midot that they've done? It seems to me to be a bit more of an open question than many people would assume. Now, in my video title, I say Noahides should be terrified. And this is why. Okay? The main liability that non-Noahides would have is that they should have bothered to learn about the obligations, but did not. Okay? Any Christian scholar, any Christian pastor, anyone working at above a certain level of knowledge in Christianity should have reasonably been expected to investigate Judaism in some way. Okay, so anyone with a master's of divinity or above is smart enough and learned enough to ask some questions. And they are not. Okay? They seem to be liable for that. Ever since October 7th, Israel's claim to the land of Israel has been one of the hottest topics. And there have been people like myself and, many others who, have been going out of their way to let people know about the religious nature of the land claim. So people have had the opportunity to investigate this, and they have not. Okay, so there is liability there. But when it comes to transgressing the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, technically it's inadvertent, it would seem, And their main liability is that they should have learned the obligations but did not. Now, this is what should terrify Noahides. If you are a Noahide, you know the obligations and are fully liable for everything. Okay? This should terrify you. This should absolutely terrify you. Because a lot of Noahides that I talk to some extent, have a bit of a superiority complex in terms of like, oh, I discovered the truth and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, it's good. It's good. But now you're fully liable. And not only that, you are fully liable for the Musar that you aren't studying. You are fully liable for any midot that you have not fully rectified. You are fully liable for any Torah that you could have studied but didn't, because you were wasting your time on Ger Toshav definitions. You are fully liable. Okay, so in some sense, it may be the case that being a Noahide is one of the most challenging and difficult places to be as a non-Jew. Because you know the obligations. You know, you either know or should know about the existence of Musar. You could be studying Path of the Just. You could be studying Pirkei Avot. Okay. If you're a scientist, you know, you could be working with rabbis to connect science back to Torah. You could be doing all of these things. And if you're not, you're liable for Bitul Torah, minimization of the Torah. So Noahides, to be honest, Noahides should be terrified. I would be less worried about your average, you know, Christian. Okay, someone with maybe grade 12 education, blue collar, going to church, they love Jesus, they love the Bible. You should not be worrying about them. Okay, because under Laws of Kings and Wars, chapter 10, I'm not sure how liable they are for idolatry. Okay, they might be getting a tremendous amount of leniency. But if you're a Noahide, you don't have that leniency. You don't have that leniency. Okay? And that means you have been given the opportunity to rectify your character traits. You've been given the opportunity to study Musar. You've been given the opportunity to assist in the Tikkun Olam project that the Jews have been working on. You have the opportunity to do all of these things. And if you're not fully engaged in that, I don't know. I don't know. So it just seems to me that Noahides are probably racking up more liability than your average Christian, your average Hindu, and maybe even, you know, the LGBT of millennials and Gen Z. Okay, so send this video to your local rabbi. Let's get, it would be nice, you know, if you're a rabbi watching this, it would be nice if you did a reaction video. That's the easiest way, I think, to do this, is a reaction video. I'm going to try to get a couple rabbis I know to comment on this. And yeah, let's see where this goes. Because it seems to me that there might be more people in Olam Haba than we expect. The only question is the size of their share. Is the size of their share. Okay. So, yeah, that's about all I had to say on this topic. Hope it was interesting. And yeah, again, send this to your local rabbi. I'll do the same. And let's get some official commentary on this issue. Thank you very much. And again, God bless.